Good morning, students. I welcome you again to the English class for class 10th, and today we'll be taking chapter number 2. That's Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. Long Walk to Freedom happens to be the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, in which he has talked about his struggle to fight against apartheid. Now, what was apartheid? Apartheid in Wikipedia, if you go and search on the net on Google, you'll be knowing that it has been referred to the system of institutionalized racial segregation that existed in South Africa and Southwest Africa from 1948 until the years 1990s, right? It was a discrimination on the basis of the color of the skin that had a political support, and only the people who were fairer than the others, who were white as far as the complexion was concerned, were only allowed to have good amount of jobs, a better quality life as compared to the people who were dark in complexion or who were darker as far as these white ones were concerned. Now, imagine in today's time, how can a person differentiate another human being on the basis of complexion? It's beyond human psyche. It's beyond human comprehension. But when we refer to this particular autobiography of Nelson Mandela, we are able to understand what he went through. And the chapter that we're going to deal with basically talks about a small portion of his autobiography. That is basically, we begin with the inaugural ceremony wherein, for the very first time, a black, that was Mr. Nelson Mandela, was almost elected to become the president of South Africa, the first black president of South Africa. That was the winning moment or the winning aspect of Nelson Mandela, who had fought so much for the freedom of his race. He was not able to understand how in this world where there is technology, where people talk about unity in diversity, whites living in the same region can overpower or try to conquer over the race that is darker to them. How can complexion become the means of selecting people for jobs, for better life, and for education, right? He has already talked about in his particular autobiography that the laws that were made for the blacks, they were heinous. They were not humane, I would say. They were not meant for human beings. Just imagine your teacher telling you, because you are darker in complexion, you're not supposed to sit in the front seat. I mean, you cannot even understand. How can a teacher, how can a person talk to you like that? Just imagine Nelson facing that particular problem in his life. Not only him, but his entire family, his friends, his community, because they were dark in complexion, right? So the various laws, even if you're going in a public place, some restaurant seats were meant to be reserved only for the whites. Some restaurants were there that did not allow the blacks to even enter. Some markets, some shops, beaches, public places, public transport, jobs. So from head to toe, wherever Nelson would see, he would just feel that this discrimination was just taking a toll on the good amount of aspects that the blacks had. You could not get a job for the sake of being a white person. This is what he felt. In short, you could not get a job, you could not get education because you're a black. How far it was just, how far it was correct. Those were the questions that were boggling Nelson's mind. And so he made up his mind that he had to fight. He had to fight for his country, he had to fight for his people, he had to fight for his race, his family, and in the end, himself. So for decades and decades, with the help of so many people who were against this particular apartheid law, right, because of the struggle and sacrifice of so many people, finally, South Africa was liberated with this particular unjust rule of the whites who had a kind of a notion that the blacks were always inferior and will be inferior to them, right? He was elected the president of South Africa, the first black president of South Africa. And the chapter of our particular book, First Flight, begins with the inaugural ceremony of Nelson Mandela being sworn in as the first black president of South Africa.